My best friend showed up to my wedding in a white gown and told everyone it looked better on her. So I replaced her on the spot. She arrived during the bridal party photos, 2 hours before the ceremony, strutting across the lawn in a floor-length white beaded dress that cost more than my entire wedding budget. My photographer stopped mid-shot. My bridesmaids went silent. My mother grabbed my arm. "Is she serious?" my sister Jen whispered. Claire did a little spin. I know, but when I saw it, I had to have it. Don't worry, nobody will confuse us. Mine is clearly more expensive. She actually said that, out loud, to my face, on my wedding day. Claire, you can't wear white to my wedding, I said. Oh please, that rule is so outdated. Besides, it's more of an ivory. See? She held the fabric next to my dress. Yours is much simpler. Plain, really. Mine has all this beadwork. My cousin Amy looked ready to tackle her. You need to change, I said. Into what? This is what I brought. You didn't bring another dress? Why would I? This is perfect. You're being dramatic, Lily. It's just a dress. Just a dress. My mother stepped forward. There's a mall 5 minutes away. Go buy something else. Claire laughed. I'm not wearing some mall dress to my best friend's wedding. I have standards. Standards. She had standards. Then you can't stay, I said. Her face shifted. You're not serious. I'm in the wedding party. I'm your maid of honor. Not dressed like that. This is ridiculous. Ask anyone. I look amazing. She turned to my bridesmaids. Don't I look amazing? Nobody answered. Claire rolled her eyes. You're all being so insecure. It's not my fault I look good in white. She walked closer to me. Remember when we went dress shopping and you tried on that gorgeous Vera Wang? And they said you couldn't pull it off? But you insisted on trying anyway? And then you bought this instead? She gestured at my dress. I'm just wearing what you couldn't. My photographer was still standing there, camera lowered. The videographer was definitely still rolling. My Aunt Helen had her phone out. That Vera Wang didn't fit because I'm not a size 0, I said. Right, exactly. So why are you mad that I can wear what you can't? Get out, I said. What? Leave, now. You're not in my wedding. You can't kick me out. I planned your bachelorette party. I organized the shower. I've been your best friend for 10 years. You showed up to my wedding in a white gown to upstage me. Upstage you? Please. This isn't about upstaging. This is about looking my best. Sorry if that threatens you. My husband-to-be Alex appeared with his groomsmen. They'd heard the commotion. He took one look at Claire and his face went red. Are you fucking kidding me? He said. Claire smiled at him. Alex, you look handsome. Doesn't this dress photograph beautifully? You need to leave, he said. Right now. Everyone's overreacting and it's just a dress. It's not just a dress, Alex said. It's attention-seeking bullshit. On our wedding day. Claire's face hardened. I see Lily's turned you against me too. I told her you were too controlling. Controlling? Alex stepped closer. You tried to convince her to call off the wedding last month. You told her she could do better. You've been sabotaging us since day one. I was looking out for her. You were jealous, he said. Just like you're jealous now. Just like you've always been jealous of her happiness. Jealous? Of what? Her department store dress? Her backyard wedding? Her ordinary life? She said ordinary like it was poison. The silence that followed was complete. Even the catering staff setting up nearby had stopped to watch. There it is, I said quietly. What you really think of me. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. You've always thought you were better. Prettier. More sophisticated. More everything. That's not true. You wore a white gown to my wedding, Claire. It's ivory. It's white. And you knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted everyone to look at you, to compare us, to see that you're thinner, richer, whatever story you tell yourself. My dad appeared with my uncle. What's the problem here? Claire's just leaving, I said. I'm not going anywhere. I'm the maid of honor. My name's on everything. The programs, the website, everything. Not anymore, my sister Jen said. She held up her phone. I just posted in the wedding group chat that there's been a change. I'm maid of honor now. Claire stared at her in shock. Her face went white and she looked around at everyone standing there, searching for someone who would back her up or tell me I was being crazy. Nobody said a word. My bridesmaids stood in a tight group with their arms crossed. Alex's groomsmen looked uncomfortable but stayed quiet. The photographer and videographer kept their cameras down. Even the caterers who'd stopped to watch didn't move. The silence stretched out so long it hurt, and I could see Claire starting to understand that her usual tricks weren't going to work this time. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it again. Her hands were shaking a little bit and she kept looking from person to person, waiting for someone to defend her or tell her it was all okay. But everyone just stared back at her with hard faces or looked away. My dad stepped forward and his voice was calm, but there was steel in it when he spoke. He told Claire she needed to get her things and leave the property right now. Claire's voice got higher, and she said she had gifts in the bridal suite, and her purse was locked inside, and how was she supposed to just leave without her stuff? Dad said someone would bring everything to her car, but she needed to go immediately. She tried to argue that she couldn't drive home without her purse and her phone was in there and this was ridiculous. My uncle moved to stand next to Dad and suddenly Claire was facing both of them, and she seemed to realize she wasn't going to win this argument. Her face turned red and her voice got shrill when she demanded to know if we were really going to ruin her reputation over a dress color. She pulled her phone out of some hidden pocket in that white dress and said she was going to post about this treatment on social media, and everyone would see how we were acting. She held the phone up like it was a weapon and said she had followers who would hear about this. Alex stepped closer and told her to go ahead and post whatever she wanted, because everyone here saw what she did and said, and the truth would speak for itself. He said she could spin it however she wanted online, but the 50 people at this venue all witnessed her show up in white and insult me on my wedding day. Claire's hand dropped a little bit and she looked at her phone screen like she wasn't sure anymore. That's when the wedding coordinator appeared from the side entrance of the venue building. Adriana walked over in her professional black dress with her clipboard and her calm face, and she stopped right in front of Claire. She said very quietly that if Claire didn't leave on her own in the next 2 minutes, venue security would escort her out. Claire stared at Adriana like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She actually laughed and said the venue staff was taking sides now, like this was some kind of joke. But Adriana's face didn't change at all. She just looked at her watch and said Claire now had 1 minute and 45 seconds to walk to the parking lot. Claire looked around one more time and I could see the exact moment she realized she'd actually lost. Her shoulders dropped and she put her phone away and turned toward the parking lot. But she stopped after 2 steps and turned back to look at me. She said I would regret throwing away our friendship over my own insecurity, and that someday I'd realize she was just trying to look her best, and I was the one who made it weird. Her voice cracked a little bit on the last words. I looked right at her and said our friendship ended the moment she wore that dress, and she'd been showing me who she really was for years, but I was too loyal to see it. I told her I finally understood that she never wanted me to be happy if it meant I might outshine her somehow. Claire's eyes got wet, but I didn't feel bad. She turned and started walking across the lawn toward the parking lot, and we all stood there watching her go. Her white dress dragged in the grass and picked up green stains on the bottom. I felt this weird mix of feelings, like relief that she was finally leaving, but also sadness that 10 years of friendship had come to this. Part of me couldn't believe it was really happening. Jen put her arm around my shoulders and squeezed. She said we needed to get me touched up and ready because I was getting married in 90 minutes no matter what drama just happened. She was right, but my hands were still shaking. The photographer came over carefully, like she wasn't sure if she should interrupt. Sloane asked if I wanted her to delete all the photos of Claire from the memory cards. She said she could wipe them completely, so I'd never have to see Claire in the wedding photos. I thought about it for a minute while everyone waited. Then I told her to keep them because someday I would want to remember that I stood up for myself, even though right now I felt like I might throw up. Sloane nodded and said she understood and she'd keep everything. I noticed my bridesmaids, Caitlin and Mila, coming toward me, and they both wrapped me in hugs. Caitlin said Claire's behavior was unforgivable, and she was so proud of me for not backing down. Mila held my hand tight and said she'd wanted to call out Claire's mean girl behavior for years, but didn't want to cause problems in our friend group. She said Claire always made little comments that seemed like jokes but were actually mean, and she would compete over everything. I asked why nobody ever said anything, and Mila looked guilty. She said they all talked about it among themselves, but figured I must see it too, and was choosing to stay friends with Claire anyway. Hearing that made me feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. Mom appeared next to us and took my arm gently. She said we should go to the bridal suite so she could fix my makeup that got smudged from angry tears. We walked together across the lawn and into the venue building. The bridal suite was cool and quiet after all the chaos outside. Mom sat me down in front of the mirror and pulled out her makeup bag. While she was touching up my face with powder and fixing my mascara, she told me about a toxic friend she had to cut off before her own wedding. She said this friend was jealous of everything and tried to sabotage the wedding in small ways. Mom said some people just can't handle seeing others happy, and Claire clearly fell into that category. She said it hurt at the time, but looking back, she was glad she removed that negativity from her life. I asked if she ever regretted it, and Mom said never, not even once. There was a knock on the door and Jen came in carrying a shopping bag. She said she personally walked Claire's belongings to her car and watched her drive away. Jen mentioned that Claire was crying and saying she didn't mean it, and this was all a misunderstanding. But Jen told her that actions have consequences, and she needed to leave us alone today. Jen said Claire tried to hug her and apologize, but Jen stepped back and just pointed to the car. She watched until Claire's car left the parking lot and turned onto the main road. I asked if Claire said anything else, and Jen shook her head. She said Claire just kept crying and saying this wasn't fair, but Jen didn't respond to any of it. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked around at everyone watching her, then back at Jen holding up her phone as proof. My dad moved closer to Claire and pointed toward the parking lot. He told her it was time to go, and his voice had that tone he used when he meant business. Claire's face went from shocked to angry in about 2 seconds. She grabbed her small clutch purse from where she'd set it on a nearby table and turned to face all of us one more time. She said we would all regret this and that she was the best thing that ever happened to me. Nobody responded. Claire spun around and started walking toward the parking lot, her white dress dragging through the grass. The bottom picked up dirt and green stains. I watched her go and felt this weird mix of relief and sadness hitting me at the same time. 10 years of friendship was ending right there on my wedding day. Jen squeezed my shoulder and said we needed to get me back to the bridal suite for touch-ups. Mom agreed and took my other arm. We walked together across the lawn toward the venue building. Behind us, I heard my uncle telling the photographer to take a break, and the caterers to continue setting up. Inside the bridal suite, Mom sat me down in front of the mirror and pulled out her makeup kit. My mascara had smudged a little from angry tears. She dabbed at it gently with a cotton pad while Jen paced behind us on her phone. Jen said she was texting the other bridesmaids to let them know what happened, and to make sure everyone knew the ceremony timeline hadn't changed. Caitlin and Mila came in a few minutes later. They both hugged me and said Claire's behavior was awful. Mila held my hand and admitted she'd wanted to call out Claire's mean comments for years, but didn't want to cause problems. She said Claire always made little jokes that were actually mean and competed over everything. I asked why nobody ever told me, and Mila looked guilty. She explained that they all talked about it among themselves but figured I must see it too, and was choosing to stay friends anyway. That made me feel stupid for not noticing sooner. Mom finished fixing my makeup and stepped back to look at me. She said I looked beautiful, and that Claire's negativity was gone now. There was a soft knock on the door and Jen went to answer it. Alex stood there in his tux looking worried. He asked if he could see me for just a minute. I stood up and walked over to him. He pulled me into a hug right there in the doorway. His arms wrapped around me tight, and he said he was sorry for not seeing how toxic Claire was sooner. He told me he should have pushed harder last month when she tried to talk me out of marrying him. I hugged him back and felt some of the tension leave my body. When we pulled apart, I told him about the Vera Wang dress comment. I explained how Claire had been making subtle digs about my body and my choices for our entire friendship. Alex's jaw tightened and his face got that angry look. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said he was glad she was gone because I deserved friends who celebrated me instead of competing with me. He kissed my forehead and told me he'd see me at the altar. Jen closed the door after he left and I sat back down. Mom handed me a bottle of water and told me to drink some. The wedding coordinator, Adriana, knocked and came in holding her clipboard. She said we were back on schedule and asked if we wanted to adjust anything in the ceremony since the maid of honor changed. Jen spoke up immediately and said she knew all of Claire's parts because she'd helped plan them. She promised she was ready to step in so smoothly that guests wouldn't even notice the switch. Adriana made some notes and said that sounded perfect. She told us we had about 40 minutes until the ceremony started and left to check on other details. Everyone else filtered out too, saying they needed to get to their places. I asked for a few minutes alone, and they all nodded and left. The bridal suite got quiet. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror in the corner. My dress looked beautiful. My hair and makeup were perfect. I looked at my reflection and reminded myself that this was my wedding day. I was marrying the person I loved. The Claire drama was awful, but it didn't get to ruin the most important day of my life. I took some deep breaths and felt myself getting calmer. There was another knock and Amy came in. She said several guests saw the confrontation and were asking what happened with Claire. People were confused about why the maid of honor wasn't around. I thought about it for a minute. Then I decided we should have Jen make a brief announcement before the ceremony started. Something vague but honest about a change in the wedding party due to personal reasons. Amy agreed and said she'd tell Jen. She hugged me and said she was proud of me for standing up to Claire. Then she left to find Jen. I checked my phone and saw some texts from friends asking if everything was okay. I sent a quick group message saying there was a small issue but everything was fine and I'd explain later. Mom came back in with Jen and my bridesmaids. It was almost time. We lined up in the hallway outside and I could hear music starting. The minister appeared next to me and pulled me aside gently. She asked if I was emotionally ready to proceed or if I needed more time. Her voice was kind and concerned. I appreciated her checking in. I told her I was absolutely ready because marrying Alex was what today was really about, not Claire's desperate attempt for attention. The minister smiled and squeezed my hand. She said she'd see me out there. My dad appeared and offered me his arm. I took it and felt his steady presence calming me. The doors opened and I could see down the aisle. The guests turned to look. The flowers were beautiful. The sun was shining. And there was Alex at the altar with the biggest smile on his face. Everything else faded away. I didn't think about Claire or the drama or anything except getting to him. Jen was standing where Claire was supposed to be, and she looked genuinely happy for us instead of resentful. Dad and I walked down the aisle and I couldn't stop smiling. When we reached the front, Dad kissed my cheek and put my hand in Alex's. The minister started talking, but I was just looking at Alex's face. His eyes were shining. During the vows, I felt this overwhelming gratitude that I'd stood up for myself earlier. Now I could be fully present for these promises we were making. Alex's voice cracked with emotion when he said his vows. He promised to always support me and protect our happiness. I knew we were starting our marriage with honesty and boundaries instead of tolerating toxic people to keep the peace. We exchanged rings and the minister pronounced us married. Alex kissed me and everyone clapped. We walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife. The reception started and guests seemed to be having a great time. The food was good and the music was perfect. But I noticed some people whispering and checking their phones. I thought maybe they were just taking photos. Then Mila came over and quietly showed me her phone. Claire had posted on social media. The post claimed she was uninvited from my wedding for looking too good. She called me an insecure bridezilla who couldn't handle having a beautiful friend. My stomach dropped. I showed Alex and he read it carefully. My first instinct was panic about what people would think. But Alex reminded me that everyone at our wedding saw what actually happened. He said we should ignore it for now and enjoy our reception. We could deal with Claire's lies tomorrow if we needed to. He was right. I put my phone away and focused on dancing with him. Dinner service started and guests moved to their tables under the white tent. The catering staff brought out the first course while soft music played from the speakers. Alex and I sat at the head table with Jen and the wedding party, and I tried to focus on the food even though my stomach felt tight. People kept glancing at the empty seat where Claire should have been sitting. My aunt came over during the salad course and bent down to talk quietly near my ear. She said she got the whole thing on video, every word Claire said, and she'd send it to me in case I needed proof later. I thanked her and she squeezed my shoulder before going back to her table. 3 more guests stopped by between courses to say they were glad I removed Claire. One of my mom's coworkers said Claire's behavior was shocking, and she couldn't believe anyone would do that at a wedding. My college roommate came over and whispered that she always thought Claire was mean, but didn't know how to say it without causing problems. Each person who approached seemed genuinely supportive, not just nosy, and it helped me feel less crazy for making such a big scene earlier. The main course arrived and I managed to eat some of the chicken and vegetables. Alex held my hand under the table while we ate. Harvey stood up with his champagne glass and tapped it with a fork. The room got quiet and everyone turned to face our table. He smiled at us and started talking about how he met Alex in college and watched him grow into an amazing person. Harvey said he knew Alex found the right partner when he saw how we support each other through challenges. He made this subtle comment about surrounding ourselves with people who genuinely want us to succeed, and I saw several guests nod and look at each other knowingly. Harvey raised his glass and everyone cheered and drank. Alex hugged him, and I felt grateful that Harvey didn't mention Claire at all, but still managed to acknowledge what happened. Jen stood up next for the maid of honor speech. She looked nervous but happy as she held her note cards. She talked about growing up with me and watching me become more confident over the years. Jen said she remembered when I was shy and scared to speak up for myself, but now I stand up for what I believe in, and set boundaries with people who don't treat me right. She said she was proud to stand beside me today, and that real friends lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. The guests clapped loudly, and some people wiped their eyes. I got up and hugged Jen while everyone was still clapping. My phone started buzzing in the small purse I'd left under my chair. I ignored it at first, but it kept going. Vibration after vibration. Alex noticed and asked if I wanted to check it. I pulled it out and saw notification after notification from social media. Claire had tagged me in multiple posts. I opened the app and felt my face get hot. She'd posted old photos of us from college, from trips we took, from birthdays and holidays, with captions about betrayal and fake friends. One post said I threw away 10 years of friendship because I was jealous. Another said I couldn't handle having a beautiful friend. A third claimed I'd been planning to kick her out all along because Alex never liked her. I showed the phone to Alex and he read through the posts with his jaw tight. He said we should have someone monitor her posts in case they get worse, but we should stay off social media for the rest of the night. Caitlin leaned over from her seat and asked if everything was okay. I showed her what Claire was posting, and Caitlin's eyes went wide. She said she could track Claire's social media and let us know if anything needs immediate response. Caitlin mentioned she's a social media manager professionally and knows how to document everything in case we need it later. I handed her my phone and felt relieved that someone else could deal with it. The DJ announced that dancing would start soon and played an upbeat song. Alex pulled me onto the dance floor and we moved together while our families joined us. I tried to focus on having fun, but my mind kept drifting to what Claire was posting and who was seeing it. My mom's friend approached during a slow song and said some mutual friends of mine and Claire's were texting, asking for my side of the story. She said word was spreading beyond just wedding guests and people wanted to know what really happened. I felt panic rising in my chest. Jen noticed my face and took my hand, leading me outside to the patio area where it was quieter. The sun was setting and the air felt cool on my skin. Jen asked if I wanted her to post a response on my behalf. I told her I didn't want to get into a social media war on my wedding night, but I was worried that Claire's version was spreading while I stayed silent. Jen said Claire was making herself look bad with all the dramatic posts, but I wasn't sure everyone would see it that way. Alex found us on the patio and sat down next to me. He suggested we post one simple statement with the facts and then let it go, not engaging with Claire's drama anymore. He helped me write a brief post on my phone saying that Claire wore a white gown to my wedding despite being asked to change, made hurtful comments about my appearance and my wedding, and was asked to leave. I kept it short and factual without any emotional language. Alex read it over and said it was perfect. I asked Sloane if she had any photos from earlier that showed Claire in the white dress next to me. Sloane pulled up her camera and found several shots from the confrontation. I picked one that clearly showed both dresses side by side and added it to my post. The image would speak for itself better than any words I could write. I hit post and watched my phone light up with notifications within seconds. Comments flooded in from people supporting my decision and expressing shock at Claire's behavior. Friends from high school, college, work, all saying they couldn't believe she did that. Some people who knew Claire commented that they weren't surprised because she'd always been competitive. My cousin shared the post to her own page. Alex's friends commented with supportive messages. The response was overwhelming and mostly positive. We went back inside to the reception, and I made a conscious choice to focus on celebrating with people who actually love us. The DJ played our favorite songs and we danced with our families and friends. We cut the cake and everyone cheered when Alex smashed a piece into my face playfully. I danced with my dad during the father-daughter dance and tried not to think about the friendship I just lost. Dad held me close and said he was proud of me for standing up to Claire. The night continued with more dancing and laughing and celebrating, and I felt lighter knowing I'd told the truth publicly. People kept coming up to hug me and say supportive things. The photographer captured moments of genuine joy and happiness. Alex spun me around on the dance floor, and I felt grateful for everyone who showed up to support us today. Near the end of the reception, when most guests were getting tired and the music had slowed down, a woman I hadn't seen in years walked over to where I was standing with Alex near the cake table. She went to college with me, and we'd been close back then, but lost touch after graduation. She touched my arm gently and said she needed to talk to me about something important. I followed her to a quieter corner of the pavilion where the music wasn't so loud. She looked uncomfortable and kept glancing at the ground before she started speaking. She told me she was sorry for not saying anything sooner about how Claire treated me. I felt confused because I didn't know what she meant at first. She explained that back in college, Claire used to make mean comments about me when I wasn't around, always with a big smile like she was joking, but everyone could tell it came from jealousy. She said Claire would point out my clothes or my grades or guys I dated and find ways to make them sound worse than they were. My stomach felt heavy hearing this information on my wedding night. The woman said she should have told me years ago, but she thought maybe Claire would grow out of it, or that it wasn't her place to get involved in our friendship. She hugged me and said she was glad I finally stood up to Claire today, because everyone at the wedding was talking about how long overdue it was. 2 more friends from college appeared next to us like they'd been waiting nearby. One of them said she heard us talking and wanted to add her own stories about Claire's behavior over the years. The other friend nodded and said she'd witnessed the same pattern of subtle put-downs disguised as friendship. They both started sharing specific examples I'd never heard before. One friend remembered Claire telling people at a party that I only got my first job because my dad knew someone at the company, which wasn't true at all. The other friend recalled Claire making jokes about my weight at group dinners, always framed as concern for my health but clearly meant to make me feel bad. They talked about how Claire would compete over everything from test scores to boyfriend quality to vacation destinations. I felt hurt learning that this had been going on behind my back for so long, but I also felt relieved knowing I wasn't imagining the toxicity in our friendship. These friends admitted they should have said something years ago instead of staying silent to avoid drama. I thanked them for finally telling me the truth even though it stung to hear. They hugged me and congratulated me on my marriage and said they hoped I'd stay in touch now that Claire wasn't controlling who I spent time with. The DJ announced the last song of the night and everyone gathered outside for the sparkler send-off. Staff members handed out long sparklers to all the guests and lit them as Alex and I stood at the top of the pavilion steps. The sparklers made bright white light in the darkness, and everyone cheered as we walked down between the 2 lines of people holding them. I felt the heat from the sparklers as we passed and smelled the sharp smoke they created. We reached Alex's car at the end of the walkway and turned to wave at everyone before getting inside. The drive to the hotel near the airport took about 20 minutes and neither of us said much at first. Then everything that happened today hit me all at once and I started crying. Not pretty crying either, but big ugly sobs that made my whole body shake. Alex pulled into the hotel parking lot and turned off the car but didn't move to get out. He just sat there and let me cry without trying to make me stop or tell me everything was fine. We eventually went inside and up to our room on the 3rd floor. Alex helped me out of my wedding dress, which took forever because of all the tiny buttons down the back. I put on the comfortable pajamas I'd packed and sat on the edge of the bed still crying. Alex sat next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. He said I was allowed to feel sad about losing my best friend, even though Claire was toxic and treated me badly. He reminded me that I did the right thing by setting boundaries, and that real friends don't show up to your wedding in a white dress to make themselves look better than you. He said real friends don't make mean comments about your body or your choices, or try to convince you to call off your wedding. I leaned against him and felt grateful that he understood I could be happy about marrying him, and sad about Claire at the same time. He didn't try to rush me through the feelings or tell me to get over it. He just held me and let me process everything that happened. After I stopped crying, I picked up my phone from the nightstand to check it one last time before bed. My post about Claire had hundreds of comments now, way more than I expected. I scrolled through them and saw messages from people I knew in high school, college, work, and even some of Alex's friends and family. Most comments were supportive and said I did the right thing by asking Claire to leave. Several people who knew Claire personally said they weren't surprised by her behavior because she'd always been competitive and mean. A few mutual friends had commented that they'd unfollowed or blocked Claire after seeing what she did. Some people sent me private messages sharing their own stories about Claire's toxic behavior over the years. One girl from high school told me Claire used to spread rumors about her. Another woman said Claire tried to steal her boyfriend at a party. The messages kept coming and I couldn't stop reading them even though I was exhausted. Alex finally took the phone from my hands and plugged it in across the room so I wouldn't be tempted to keep checking it. We turned off the lights and got into bed. I fell asleep quickly from being so tired and emotionally drained. The next morning we woke up early to catch our flight to Hawaii. I felt nervous about the honeymoon because I kept thinking about Claire and wondering what she was posting now. At the airport, I pulled out my phone while Alex was getting coffee and scrolled through social media. Caitlin had sent me a text saying she was monitoring everything and would only contact me if something urgent happened. She told me to put my phone away and enjoy my honeymoon without worrying about Claire's drama. I texted back thanking her and promising to try. On the plane, I turned my phone to airplane mode and made a decision to stop checking social media for the next week. Alex squeezed my hand during takeoff and said he was proud of me for choosing to focus on us instead of Claire. The flight was long but comfortable and I managed to sleep for a few hours. When we landed in Hawaii, the warm air and sunshine felt amazing after the stress of yesterday. We took a taxi to our resort and checked into our room overlooking the ocean. The view was beautiful with palm trees and blue water stretching out forever. I felt myself starting to relax for the first time since the wedding drama started. The first few days of the honeymoon were great. We spent time at the beach, went snorkeling, ate at nice restaurants, and explored the island, but I kept thinking about Claire when I should have been enjoying myself. I'd check my phone when Alex went to the bathroom or when he was in the shower. I'd scroll through the comments on my post and read the messages people were sending me. I couldn't stop wondering what Claire was doing and saying, and if she was still posting lies about me. On the 3rd day, Alex noticed me looking at my phone under the beach towel. He sat up in his beach chair and suggested we talk about it instead of letting it eat at me all week. That evening, we stayed in our room instead of going out to dinner. We ordered room service and sat on the balcony watching the sunset while I told him everything I'd been thinking and feeling. I admitted I couldn't stop checking my phone even though I knew I should let it go. He listened without judging me and said it made sense that I was still processing everything that happened. I told Alex I felt guilty for ruining Claire's reputation, even though she brought it on herself with her behavior. He asked me why I felt responsible for protecting someone who treated me so badly for so long. I said I didn't know. Maybe because we'd been friends for 10 years and I still cared about her despite everything. Alex helped me understand that I had a people-pleasing problem that let Claire manipulate me for our entire friendship. He pointed out that I didn't ruin anything because I just stopped protecting Claire from the results of her own actions. He said Claire chose to wear that dress. Claire chose to make those comments. Claire chose to post lies on social media, and now Claire had to deal with people knowing the truth about her. I sat there thinking about what he said, and realized he was right. I'd spent years making excuses for Claire's behavior, and trying to keep the peace instead of standing up for myself. Alex reminded me that real change meant letting people face the outcomes of their choices instead of always trying to fix things for them. Halfway through the honeymoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. I almost didn't look at it because I'd been doing better about staying off social media. But the message preview said it was about Claire, so I opened it. Caitlin wrote that Claire had deleted all her posts about the wedding and made all her social media accounts private. She said Claire was getting massive backlash from people who saw what she did. Several people from Claire's life, including some of her own family members, had reached out to her directly to say her behavior at my wedding was wrong and unacceptable. Caitlin said the whole thing had backfired on Claire in a big way, and I didn't need to worry about her spreading lies anymore because people saw through them. I showed the message to Alex and felt this weird mix of relief and sadness. Part of me was glad that people knew the truth and Claire couldn't keep playing the victim. But another part of me felt sad that our 10-year friendship had ended this way with public drama and everyone taking sides. Alex read the message and then looked at me seriously. He said the friendship was already over before the wedding. I just finally saw it clearly for what it was. He reminded me that Claire's behavior at the wedding wasn't a one-time mistake, but the final obvious proof of how she'd been treating me all along. He said I'd been grieving the loss of this friendship for a while without realizing it. Every time Claire made a mean comment or tried to compete with me or undermined my relationship with him, the wedding just made it impossible to ignore anymore. I knew he was right, but it still hurt thinking about all those years of friendship that turned out to be fake. We sat on the balcony for a long time, not saying anything, just watching the ocean and holding hands. I felt grateful to have Alex and to have finally learned what real friendship and real love were supposed to look like. The next morning, we went snorkeling, and I didn't check my phone once during the entire 3-hour boat trip. Alex noticed and squeezed my hand underwater while we were looking at sea turtles. We spent the afternoon at the pool reading books and actually finishing chapters instead of getting distracted by social media drama. That evening, we tried a new restaurant, and I ordered what I wanted without thinking about whether it was the right choice or if someone would judge me for it. Walking back to our room along the beach, I realized how much lighter I felt without constantly worrying about Claire's opinion on everything. For 10 years, I'd been managing her feelings and walking on eggshells around her criticism disguised as concern. I'd spent so much energy trying to make her happy, or at least keep her from being mean, that I forgot what it felt like to just exist without that pressure. Alex and I stayed up late on the balcony talking about all the times Claire had made subtle digs that I'd brushed off or excused. He remembered specific comments from years ago that I'd completely blocked out because accepting they were mean would have meant admitting my best friend was toxic. We made plans for what we wanted to do when we got home, and I didn't have to factor in Claire's schedule or mood, or whether she'd approve of our choices. The freedom felt almost strange after so long. On our last day in Hawaii, I sat on the beach with the journal I'd brought and started writing everything down. I wrote about recognizing red flags in friendships, like when someone constantly competes with you or makes you feel bad about your happiness. I wrote about trusting my instincts when someone's words don't match their actions, like how Claire always said she supported me, but then tried to talk me out of marrying Alex. I filled pages with thoughts about choosing people who genuinely celebrate your success, instead of resenting it or trying to diminish it. I wrote about the difference between friends who lift you up and friends who keep you small so they can feel bigger. Looking back at our friendship with clear eyes, I could see the pattern of Claire's jealousy whenever something good happened to me. Every promotion, every relationship milestone, every achievement came with her subtle put-downs or her own competing announcement. I wrote about learning to value myself enough to walk away from people who don't value me, even if we have history together. The journal entry got long and emotional, but writing it all out helped me process everything that happened and understand why it needed to happen. We flew home the next day and landed late at night, both of us exhausted from traveling. Alex carried our bags up to the apartment door and stopped. A huge flower arrangement sat on our doorstep, easily 3 feet tall with white lilies and roses and greenery. I picked up the card while Alex unlocked the door. The note was from Claire's parents, and I read it twice to make sure I understood correctly. They wrote that they were horrified when they heard what Claire did at our wedding. They said they raised her better than that, and they completely understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. The apology felt genuine and sad, like they were embarrassed by their daughter's behavior. They mentioned that they'd tried to teach her to be happy for others, but somewhere along the way she'd become bitter and competitive. I showed the card to Alex, and he said it was nice of them to reach out, but it didn't change what Claire did. We brought the flowers inside and I put them on the kitchen table, feeling this weird mix of validation that even her own parents recognized how wrong she was, and sadness that our friendship had ended, so badly that her parents felt the need to apologize for her. The next morning, my mom called while I was unpacking and asked how the honeymoon was. I told her it was amazing and exactly what we needed after all the wedding drama. She said she was glad because things had gotten interesting while we were gone. Several mutual friends had reached out to her expressing support and sharing that they'd had similar issues with Claire over the years. Mom listed off names of people I'd known for years who apparently had Claire stories they'd never told me. One friend said Claire had made mean comments about her weight at every gathering. Another said Claire always had to one-up any good news with something better happening to her. Someone else mentioned that Claire talked badly about people behind their backs while acting sweet to their faces. My mom said it seemed like I wasn't the only person Claire treated this way, just the first one to publicly call it out. Hearing that other people had experienced Claire's toxicity made me feel less crazy for ending the friendship, but also sad that so many people had been quietly dealing with her behavior without saying anything. Mom said sometimes it takes one person standing up to a bully before others feel safe sharing their own experiences. She reminded me that I did the right thing even though it was hard. A few days later, I met Jen, Caitlin, and Mila for lunch at our favorite spot downtown. We got a table on the patio and ordered drinks and appetizers, and then we spent the next 2 hours talking through everything that happened. They all said they were relieved that Claire was out of our friend group and admitted they'd found her exhausting and mean for years. Jen said she'd wanted to say something after Claire made that comment about my dress being plain, but she didn't want to cause drama before the wedding. Caitlin mentioned that Claire had sent her nasty messages after the wedding calling us all jealous and boring. Mila said Claire used to make subtle digs about everyone in the group and then act like she was joking if anyone got upset. They all agreed that our friend group felt lighter and more genuine without Claire's constant negativity and competition. We talked about how we'd all been walking on eggshells around her for so long that we forgot friendship wasn't supposed to feel like that. They apologized for not speaking up sooner about Claire's behavior, and I told them I understood because I'd been making excuses for her longer than anyone. We made plans to get together more often now that we didn't have to navigate Claire's moods and drama. Caitlin pulled out her phone during lunch and showed me screenshots she'd saved of Claire's deleted posts from right after the wedding. She'd captured everything before Claire took it down, including the post claiming I was a bridezilla, and the comments where Claire said I was jealous of her looks. Caitlin said she saved them in case I ever needed proof of what really happened, especially since Claire was spinning a different story. We talked about whether I should block Claire on everything or leave communication open. Part of me wanted to leave it open in case she genuinely apologized, but the bigger part of me knew that Claire would just try to manipulate her way back into my life like she'd done before. Mila pointed out that Claire had already shown she'd lie on social media and trash me publicly, so why give her access to keep doing that? Jen said blocking her would protect my peace and send a clear message that the friendship was over. I pulled out my phone right there at lunch and blocked Claire on every platform while my friends watched. It felt final and sad, but also necessary. I didn't trust her not to keep trying to worm her way back in with fake apologies and manipulation tactics that had worked on me for years. About a week after we got back from Hawaii, I was making breakfast when my phone dinged with an email notification. I checked it and saw Claire's name in my inbox. My stomach dropped even though I'd blocked her everywhere else and somehow forgot about email. The message was long, maybe 4 or 5 paragraphs, and started with an apology. She said she was sorry for wearing the white dress and for the comments she made. She wrote that she'd been going through a hard time and took it out on me, which wasn't fair. She said she missed our friendship and wanted to meet for coffee to talk things through. Reading it, I felt that familiar pull to give her another chance. 10 years of friendship doesn't just disappear, and part of me wanted to believe she was genuinely sorry. She sounded sad and regretful in the email, and my people-pleasing instinct kicked in telling me I should at least hear her out. I read the email 3 more times trying to figure out if it was real or just more manipulation. I showed the email to Alex when he got home from work and asked what he thought I should do. He read it carefully, and then pointed out that Claire's apology focused mostly on her feelings and her excuses, rather than taking real responsibility for her actions. He showed me how she said she was going through a hard time, instead of acknowledging that wearing a white dress to my wedding was deliberately hurtful. He noted that she asked to meet for coffee, which would put me in a position of having to respond to her in person, instead of giving me space to decide on my own timeline. Alex said he'd support whatever I decided, but reminded me that I didn't owe her forgiveness or another chance just because she was asking for it. He brought up all the times over the years when Claire had crossed boundaries, and then apologized just enough to keep me around, and he asked if I really thought this time would be different. Sitting there looking at the email with Alex's observations in my head, I started to see the pattern more clearly. Claire always knew exactly what to say to pull me back in. I made an appointment with my therapist for later that week because I needed help processing everything. Sitting in her office, I told her about the wedding, the social media drama, the honeymoon processing, and now Claire's email. My therapist listened and then asked me to describe the pattern of Claire's behavior over our entire friendship. As I talked through specific examples spanning years, she helped me see how Claire would push boundaries, hurt me, and then apologize just enough to keep me engaged without actually changing her behavior. My therapist said that real change requires consistent different behavior over time, not just words in an email after facing consequences. She pointed out that Claire's apology came only after her social media posts backfired and people turned against her, not because she genuinely understood how her actions hurt me. We talked about how I'd spent years making excuses for Claire's toxicity, because admitting she was a bad friend meant confronting that I'd wasted so much time on someone who didn't actually care about me. My therapist reminded me that recognizing a toxic relationship and ending it isn't failure, it's growth and self-respect. That evening, I sat down at my laptop and wrote a response to Claire. I told her that I needed space and wasn't ready to meet or talk right now. I wrote that her behavior at my wedding was the final obvious example of years of subtle toxicity I'd been ignoring. I explained that I'd spent our entire friendship walking on eggshells around her criticism and competition, and I was done making excuses for behavior that hurt me. I said I hoped she would get help addressing whatever made her act that way, but I needed to protect my peace and my mental health. I kept the email short and clear, not angry but firm about my boundaries. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send and then immediately felt lighter. Setting that boundary felt scary, but also empowering, like I was finally choosing myself over someone else's feelings for the first time in years. The next morning, I woke up to another email from Claire already in my inbox, sent less than 2 hours after my boundary message. The subject line said, "Really?" And I felt my stomach drop before I even opened it. She wrote that she couldn't believe I was holding a grudge over one mistake, and that real friends forgive each other instead of throwing away years of friendship. She said I was being dramatic and hurtful by refusing to meet with her, and that if I cared about our friendship at all, I would give her a chance to explain in person. The whole email was designed to make me feel guilty, using phrases like, "after everything we've been through," and "I thought you were better than this." She ended by saying she hoped I would reconsider before it was too late to fix things between us. I read it twice and felt that familiar pull to respond, to defend myself, to explain why I needed space. Then I remembered what my therapist said about Claire's pattern of apologizing just enough to keep me around without actually changing. This email proved she hadn't learned anything from the wedding disaster, or from losing friends over her social media posts. She still thought she could manipulate me into giving her another chance by making me feel like the bad guy for setting boundaries. I clicked the block button on her email address and then blocked her phone number too. It felt scary, but also freeing, like I was finally protecting myself instead of protecting her feelings. Over the next month, I made a real effort to spend more time with Jen, Caitlin, and Mila, the friends who had supported me through the wedding drama and its aftermath. We met for coffee, went to movies, had dinner at each other's apartments. I was surprised by how easy and fun these hangouts felt, compared to the constant tension of being around Claire. Nobody criticized my outfit choices or made comments about my weight. Nobody turned every conversation into a competition about who had the better job or nicer apartment or more exciting plans. We just talked and laughed and supported each other like actual friends. Caitlin told me about her work stress and I listened without judging. Mila shared that she was thinking about breaking up with her boyfriend, and we all gave honest advice without making it about ourselves. Jen and I spent a Saturday organizing my apartment, and she didn't once suggest that I should buy nicer furniture or move to a better neighborhood. It hit me how much energy I'd been spending for years trying to manage Claire's reactions and avoid her criticism. One afternoon, Amy called and told me that Claire had reached out to her trying to get information about me. Claire apparently sent a long message saying she was worried about me and asking if Amy would talk to me about giving Claire another chance. Amy shut it down immediately and told Claire that what she did at my wedding was unforgivable and that she needed to respect my boundaries and leave me alone. Amy said Claire tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, but Amy told her that everyone saw exactly what happened and no amount of explaining would change it. Hearing that Amy had my back like that made me feel protected and supported by my family in a way I hadn't expected. It also made me realize that Claire was still trying to find ways around my boundaries instead of accepting them. I started noticing small changes in how I felt day to day, without Claire's constant presence in my life. When I posted photos on social media of Alex and me at a restaurant, I didn't feel anxious waiting for Claire to comment something backhanded about the food or the place. When I shared that I got a small promotion at work, I didn't brace myself for Claire to mention her own bigger promotion or question whether my new role was really that impressive. When I bought a new dress I actually liked, I didn't hear her voice in my head criticizing the fit or the price or suggesting something better. Simple things like sharing good news or making choices felt lighter without worrying about Claire's judgment or her need to one-up everything. I hadn't realized how much space her toxicity had been taking up in my brain until it was gone. 3 months after the wedding, I got a message from a girl named Sarah who I'd met a few times through mutual friends but didn't know well. She said she needed to tell me something and asked if we could talk on the phone. When I called her, Sarah explained that she'd been friends with Claire for about a year and had started noticing weird behavior. She said Claire had been talking badly about me to anyone who would listen, claiming I was mean and cruel for kicking her out of my wedding over a dress color. Claire was telling people I'd always been jealous of her and that I couldn't handle her looking better than me. Sarah said she'd believed Claire's version at first because she didn't know me well, but then she started seeing a pattern. Claire would trash talk other friends behind their backs, always positioning herself as the victim of everyone else's jealousy or insecurity. Sarah realized that Claire's stories never quite added up, and that she seemed to have drama with almost everyone in her life. After seeing my social media posts about what actually happened at the wedding and talking to other people who knew both of us, Sarah decided to distance herself from Claire. She wanted to warn me that Claire was still spreading lies and to thank me for being honest about the situation. My first reaction was feeling upset and angry that Claire was out there lying about me to people. I told Alex about Sarah's call and he could see I was getting worked up about it. He reminded me that anyone who actually knows me won't believe Claire's version of events, and anyone who does believe her without asking for my side isn't someone I need in my life anyway. He pointed out that the truth already came out publicly with photos and witness accounts, and I didn't need to keep defending myself to every person Claire complained to. He said that Claire making herself look bad by constantly trash-talking me just proved to more people that she was the problem, not me. That perspective helped me let go of the need to control Claire's narrative or correct every lie she told. Thanksgiving rolled around, and I felt genuine relief that I didn't have to deal with Claire being at any of our friend group celebrations. In past years, she'd always made Friendsgiving awkward by complaining about the food, showing up late, or making everything about her latest drama. This year, our friend group gathering felt relaxed and real. Everyone brought dishes they actually wanted to make instead of trying to impress Claire. We played games and told stories, and nobody had to walk on eggshells. Mila mentioned halfway through the evening that this was the most fun Friendsgiving we'd had in years, and Caitlin agreed that the energy felt different in a good way. Nobody said Claire's name, but we all knew what had shifted. The group had naturally reorganized without her, and it turned out we got along better without the constant tension she created. A week later, I was at the grocery store picking up milk when I literally bumped shopping carts with one of Claire's aunts who I'd met several times over the years. I froze, expecting awkwardness or confrontation, but she immediately smiled and said my name warmly. She asked how I was doing and said she'd heard about the wedding situation from Claire's mom. I braced myself for criticism, but instead she apologized for Claire's behavior and said the family wasn't surprised. She mentioned that Claire had struggled with jealousy issues for years, especially toward friends who were happy or successful. She said they'd tried to address it, but Claire always blamed everyone else and refused to take responsibility. Her aunt told me she was glad I set boundaries and that she hoped I was doing well in my marriage. She said she understood completely why I'd cut contact, and didn't blame me at all. The encounter left me feeling validated, but also sad that Claire's own family recognized her toxic patterns. 6 months after the wedding, Alex and I had settled into married life, and I barely thought about Claire anymore. We'd developed our routines, decorated our apartment, started planning for the future. When Claire did cross my mind, it was usually because something reminded me of our past friendship, and I'd feel this wave of relief that I'd finally recognized the toxicity and removed it from my life. It had been painful to end a 10-year friendship, especially in such a public, dramatic way, but I couldn't deny that I was happier without her constant criticism and competition. Alex and I would be cooking dinner or watching TV, and I'd realize I hadn't thought about Claire in days, sometimes weeks. The mental space she used to occupy was now filled with actual peace. One evening, I got a message request on social media from someone I didn't know well, a girl who'd been in a few of the same social circles, but we'd never really talked. Her message said she needed to thank me for speaking up publicly about my experience with Claire. She explained that Claire had recently done something similar at her birthday party, showing up in an outfit that was clearly meant to outshine the birthday girl, and making comments all night about how she looked better than everyone there. This girl said that because she'd seen my wedding posts and knew about Claire's pattern, she was able to recognize the behavior immediately and set boundaries right away, instead of tolerating it or making excuses. She kicked Claire out of her party and didn't feel guilty about it, because my story had helped her see that Claire's behavior wasn't normal friend behavior. She thanked me for being brave enough to share what happened, because it gave her permission to protect herself too. Reading that message made me realize that standing up to Claire, even though it was scary and messy in public, might have helped other people avoid similar situations or recognize toxic patterns in their own friendships. I typed back a long message telling her she did the right thing, and that nobody should have to deal with that kind of behavior at their own celebration. I explained how setting boundaries early saves so much pain later, and I was glad my story helped her see the pattern quickly, instead of years down the road like I did. Hitting send felt good, like maybe the whole mess with Claire served a purpose beyond just my own wedding drama. Over the next few days, I thought about that message a lot, and realized that being honest about what happened, even when it was uncomfortable in public, might have protected other people from similar situations. The idea that my experience could help someone else recognize toxic friendship patterns made the whole painful situation feel slightly less awful. A year after the wedding, Jen came over with a bottle of wine and suggested we finally go through all the wedding photos that Sloane had sent months ago. I'd been avoiding them because I knew Claire would be in the early shots and I didn't want to relive that morning. But Jen insisted it was time. So we opened my laptop and started clicking through hundreds of images. The first dozen photos showed Claire in that white dress during the confrontation, and I felt my stomach tighten seeing her face again. But then we got to the ceremony and reception photos, the ones taken after she left, and I noticed something interesting. Everyone looked so much more relaxed and genuinely happy in those later shots. My bridesmaids were laughing without that tight, stressed look they'd had earlier. My parents looked calm instead of worried. Even Alex and his groomsmen seemed looser and more natural once the drama was over. Sloane had captured real joy instead of people trying to ignore tension, and the difference was obvious when you looked at the photos side by side. I've learned that real friendship doesn't come with constant competition or subtle comments disguised as jokes. The people around me now celebrate when good things happen, instead of finding ways to make it about themselves. Caitlin texts me funny memes without comparing our lives. Mila shares her accomplishments without putting mine down. Jen supports my decisions without questioning whether I'm making mistakes. The Claire situation hurt at the time and probably always will a little bit, but cutting her out was necessary for my own peace. I'm better now at recognizing when someone's behavior doesn't match their words, and I don't ignore red flags just because we have history together. Standing up for myself that day, in front of everyone, taught me that protecting my happiness matters more than avoiding conflict or keeping toxic people comfortable.